Put a price on carbon, that's okay, but make it even for all of the players and then don't change it.
Welcome back to this series of podcasts on climate change. We've met with Professor Reto Knuthi, one of the most renowned climate scientists in the world. In episode 6, we're going to double down on the responsibility of governments. We're going to talk about what kind of governmental system, dictatorship, democracy, what kind of government will help us in the future. We're going to talk about who needs to pay to clean the planet up. Should all countries pay the same because we're all suffering the same under climate change? Or is it down to certain countries paying more whilst other countries pay less to fix this problem? So please do sit back, get your popcorn out and enjoy this podcast. I certainly loved speaking to Reto Knuthi, thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Hope you do too. And this is where we get to the point of regulation politics, you know, the government. And if I just think about 3 different governments to make a comparison here. China claims it's a direct democracy. I believe a lot of political scientists, and I'm not a specialist, so I'm being very careful how I say this, but a lot of political scientists say no, it's a dictatorship, right? Then if we look at India, I believe it's the world's largest democracy, or that's how people describe it. And if we then look at Switzerland, which I think is a wonderful model, it's a democracy, but there's also a lot of decentralized decisions, and a lot of decisions come to referendums, right? So you often hear in the news in the UK or whatever, Switzerland is voting on, and you think, oh my God, this is like Brexit, but you've got like Brexit every few weeks, right?
Yeah, we vote on everything, even on the completely irrelevant things. Right?
Yeah. And I remember like a very close friend of mine who's older, he's unfortunately passed away now, but when Brexit was being discussed for the first time in England, he said, I don't believe in referendums. Now, this is somebody I always respected, and I thought, this is terrible, this is the death of democracy, how can he be that sort of person? But if I see what then happened with Brexit, regardless whether it was right or wrong, but if I see how it really split a nation up and how badly it's been managed, you know, I'm not going to give my opinion here as a British person living in a different country. You can probably work it out. But the point is, even if it was the best idea ever, it doesn't seem to have been managed very well. Now, if we bring that back to China, I believe, uses, I think, 3,000 gigawatts of energy a year. And last year, 600 gigawatts came from solar. I think 400 from wind and 400 from hydro energy. And the same for Switzerland as well. There's a lot of hydro energy, not so much wind and solar. In India, they've also got, I think, 100 gigawatts of solar energy. But if we look at democracy and we look at one of the largest democracies in the world, America, we see how a voted-in politician is actually fighting against climate protection. And is democracy the right way? What's the role of a government in the whole climate debate?
I mean, you're now asking a physicist to talk about democracy. It's not easy, obviously, and certain things work in certain countries, and they do not necessarily work in other countries and contexts. That's one thing, right? Democracy is not perfect, but I would still say it's one of the best forms. We haven't come up with something better, I would say, right? I think democracy has its limitations where things get very complicated that the public really doesn't understand anymore. And that's where we struggle sometimes in Switzerland, where we vote on things that are highly technical and the public really doesn't, I would claim in some cases they don't really understand the full implications on what they're voting on. But it's been successful in the sense that once something is voted on, people accept it, whatever the decision is, and we're going to implement it, and people are fine, right? It may not be right in all cases, or sometimes it may be a poor decision, but that's how it is. I think in a Chinese system, you can make certain things much more long-term and much more strategic than in a situation like here. And China has invested for a long time in energy and in technology, not because they want to save the world, but because they see it as a geopolitic strategic move. They dominate the world. There was an Australian study that found that China is controlling 57 out of 64 key technologies.
57 out of 64.
It's basically everything from photovoltaics to solar to chips to biotech. I mean, basically they do everything, right? They do everything. And they didn't do it because they felt they want to save the world, but because they saw that change was positive in a sense that it meant earning more money and getting more influence, geopolitically, economically. And I'm sometimes surprised that the Western world has not embraced and understood this, right? I mean, in Germany, they're still talking about whether they want to ban the combustion engine car or not.
Yeah.
The combustion engine car is dead, honestly. Yeah. Whether you ban it or not, it's not going to survive.
The consumers just don't want it, right?
The consumer will no longer buy it at some point because it's technologically just poor, right?
Yeah.
So if we could have a governance system, whatever democracy that is, or not democracy, where there could be a long-term strategic thinking, I think we will be better off. We would be better off because we make the decisions that are actually sort of climate-proof and future-proof. It would also be beneficial for the companies because they want some security in planning. Right? I think the worst what's happening now is that there is no clear path forward. Some countries are moving forward. The US is completely turning away and moving backwards. So what do you do in this sort of uncertainty space? I mean, the US tariffs discussion is another thing, right?
Yeah.
You do nothing, right? Yeah. Because you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. Don't spend any money.
You don't
rather
invest.
have a recession. Yeah.
You don't invest because you're not sure whether it's going to pay off or not. So I was at a meeting 25 years ago in the US with people from the oil industry, and they said, put a price on carbon, that's okay, but make it even for all of the players, and then don't change it. Don't change it, even if it's the wrong price, but don't change it, because the thing we want is a certain planning horizon, and then we will make it happen. We will invest and we'll do it, right? But it should be such that all of the players have to contribute, and you cannot change course every half year, because that's terrible for the economy.
So I think if we compare this to like the weather and the climate, you said earlier on, and it's something we also learned in David Steinforth's podcast, you know, the weather is what happens in the next few weeks. Can I go skiing this weekend? Can I have a barbecue in summer, you know, in a few weeks' time? And whereas when we talk about climate change, we're talking about long-term effects. And what we're basically saying is if we look at dictatorships and democracies, if we look at the role of governments, what we need to do is we need to kind of decouple the short term and the long term. Now, maybe that means we have two governments. We've got the long-term government that are sworn in for a longer period of time and have those long-term projects that they deal with. And then you've got the people who are actually looking after the budget, the GDP and the stuff that's actually having an effect for this year and how many school places we have and things like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't go as far as saying we change democracy. I think that would be a very ambitious project, at least in this country. But if we could have some kind of long-term shared view of where we're going, that would be really, really helpful for making decisions and making investments. And we have to, I think, accept, as much as we accept freedom and markets, that without certain boundary conditions from a political point of view, it's going to be very hard to solve this problem, right? Because at the moment when I put out CO2, with a few exceptions, I'm not paying for the damage I'm causing. And the ton of carbon that I put out causes somewhere between $300 and a few $1,000s of damage, right? Somewhere at some point in the future. But I'm not paying. But someone is, of course, paying, right? They're paying in terms of cost of
flood damage,
food or natural disasters or health, or what someone is paying, right? So as long as we don't have a way of making sure that everybody contributes to the solution, and that's where the United Nations Framework Convention comes into play, where there's this sort of common but differentiated responsibility. Everybody has to contribute, and those who can do more, they should do more. As long as we don't have that in place, it's going to be very difficult to solve that. And I think you can have that general understanding that everybody contributes, and you can still have market-based mechanisms where the best technology survives, right?
Okay, so we're going through the list of responsibilities. We've talked about the consumers, we've talked about the industry, We talked about politicians, now let's get to the scientists. How do scientists need to change? Is it just about science carrying on in its ivory tower, or what's going to happen in terms of science to save the planet? So that was a heavy one, right? So very interesting facts and opinions coming out of there. I do hope that conversation was enlightening for you. As we move out of this 6th episode, and we're going to move on to our final episode in this podcast series with Professor Knuti, that's where we're going to be talking about the role of science. We're going to talk about the changing role of society in the future. So do make sure that you're registered to the Earth Circle on YouTube, or otherwise that you've registered as a Patreon on patreon.com. Search for the Earth Circle. If you're registered up there, you can hear all of these interviews all at once. They're all waiting for you there, folks. See you next time for the final episode in this series.